The Wheel and the Butterfly. Written by Justice3442 and read
by Justice
and 3442. Chapter 27. Pinky vs. Parkour. Dan looked over at his roommate and sighed.
"You're making that face,"
Dan stated irritably from the red couch, looking away from the TV set. "What face?" Pinky replied from the red easy chair, looking up from her computer with sad, pleading eyes and quivering lips. She was wearing a red and white striped shirt and a pair of rolled-up jean shorts.
"The look where I have to do some bizarre asinine task or you're gonna be a sad, depressing heap for the foreseeable future,"
Dan replied. He was wearing the same outfit he wore every day, a black jerk shirt and a pair of jeans. Pinky's pout increased and she turned to the laptop screen to face Dan.
"It's a shirtless dude jumping around like a ninny,"
Dan responded flatly.
"Are you upset because you can't jump around shirtless like a ninny? Because that's about half of what we do in the apartment."
"No, I used to be able to do stuff like that," Pinky responded, motioning to the computer screen.
"You used to be able to put yourself in harm's way by running at cars that were driving towards you?"
Dan looked towards the ceiling and turned a palm up.
"I mean, that's irresponsibly dangerous, but I can still film you doing that if you like."
Pinky sat the laptop down and stood up to her feet. "No, I used to be able to slide down stair railings and land on my feet and jump from rooftop to rooftop. Now I can't even jump through a first-story window without landing on my face on the other side," Pinky complained. Dan stood and walked towards Pinky, rubbing a hand over his mouth and chin in contemplation.
Your dismount could use work, but hey!"
Dan smiled, putting a comforting arm around his roomie's shoulders and pointing an index finger at her.
"You're perfect just the way you are."
"Aw, that's sweet," Pinky replied, looping an arm around Dan's torso and giving him a little squeeze before parting. "But I miss having a low center of gravity. I miss not being lumpy," Pinky stated, folding her arms across her chest and raising them to emphasize her ample lumpiness. Dan stared blankly at Pinky for a couple seconds.
"Did I mention you're perfect just the way you are?"
"Thanks, Dan," Pinky said with a smile. "But I can't even do a cartwheel without a crash-tastic finish. See? Watch!" Pinky said as she walked behind the couch. Dan shrugged.
"I'm always up for watching you injure yourself."
Pinky stood up straight, put her hands up in the air, quickly bent sideways onto her hands, lifted her feet up, and careened directly into the bathroom sink with a startling yelp. "Owie!" Pinky murmured from her upside-down heap on the bathroom floor.
"Pinky!
A small voice called out.
Pinky!"
Dan looked down at the small compact mirror sitting next to what appeared to be a large chrome squirt gun on the crate that served as a coffee table. He bent down and picked it up.
"Hey, Sparkler,"
he answered. Twilight looked back at him with narrowed eyes.
"Hi, Dan. Where's Pinky?" "Bathroom,"
Dan answered.
"Can I take a message?" "It's sort of insanely important,"
Twilight replied.
"Can't you just say hecka like a normal person?" "Well, I'm a pony,"
Twilight reminded.
"with an insufferably purple color scheme."
Dan felt a hand on his face as Pinky pushed him aside. He fell onto the couch as Pinky snatched the mirror. "Hey, Twilight, what's up?" Pinky asked.
"Pinky, I have something I mean very important to tell you."
Twilight told Pinky and Dan about Discord, the Order Keepers, their goals, and the potential danger they were all in. "War?" Pinky exclaimed.
"Aw, you ponies get to war with magical extra-dimensional travelers? I never get to have any fun."
Dan whined. "Dan, the apartment was infested with radioactive mutant bats not 3 days ago," Pinky reminded. "Mr. Mumbles bit one and was shooting green radioactive beams out of her eyes, remember?" Mr. Mumbles trotted out of the bedroom with a meow. Dan put on a sullen face.
"Don't remind me. I bit one and all I got was radiation poisoning. Why does Mr. Mumbles get all the luck and superpowers?"
Mr. Mumbles jumped up on the couch and rolled over onto her back, exposing her belly to Dan.
"Aw, who can stay mad at you?"
Dan asked rhetorically, scratching the cat's belly. Twilight raised an eyebrow.
"Your cat shoots laser beams."
"Radioactive beams," Pinky corrected.
"Right, radioactive beams out of her eyes. Isn't that sort of incredibly dangerous?"
Twilight asked, motioning out with a forehoof. "It's okay, Twilight. We get her some medicine and..." 2 green bolts of energy shot straight up into the ceiling with a loud zorch. Pinky's eyes went wide as she turned to see Dan's face had been mildly scorched. The 2 roommates then looked up into the brand new black smoldering hole in their ceiling. Dan sighed and picked up Mr. Mumbles.
"I'll give her some medicine."
Mr. Mumbles hissed and attempted to squirm out of his grasp. Dan brought the cat into the bathroom with him and closed the door behind the 2.
"So, what are you going to do?"
Twilight asked. The sound of Dan screaming erupted from the bathroom along with an angry and a couple more zorches. Pinky sat down on the couch, continuing to hold the mirror at face level. Well, the vet said, Pinky began.
I meant about TOK.
Twilight specified. Oh, well, what can we do? Pinky replied. I mean, they can strike anywhere at any time. It's not like we can sit around waiting for them to show up. The bathroom door flew open, and Mr. Mumbles bounded out into the bedroom with an angry meow and a hiss. Dan trudged back towards Pinky, covered in scratches. His black jerk shirt had a couple of fresh holes in it. His hair was standing up as dark smoke wafted from it, and his freshly exposed skin was a color similar to his shirt.
What were we talking about again?
Dan inquired. Twilight was asking what we're gonna do if TOK shows up.
Punch them in their cloudy faces?
Dan offered.
Wait, do they have faces?
Pinky shrugged. They have eyes, she offered.
Good enough for me.
Dan replied.
Dan, you can't punch magic ethereal beings in the face.
Twilight declared in a mildly irritated tone.
Don't tell me what I can't punch!
Dan shot back. Pinky motioned to Dan with a free hand. There you go. If they show up to send me away to a boring dimension, Dan will punch them in the face. Twilight brought a forehoof up to her face and gave an exasperated sigh. Don't worry, Twilight, Pinky said. If my knees start getting pinchy, I'll contact you right away. Twilight rubbed a forehoof horizontally across her chin as she regarded her friend with serious-looking eyes.
Doesn't that happen a lot over there?
Not really, Pinky informed. I think my body got used to the constant attacks by strange-horrific creatures that shoot lightning out of their mouths and burst into flames if you pet them too hard. I think the guy who moved into one of the apartments below us is a mad scientist supervillain or something, Pinky explained.
Sounds terrifying?
Twilight offered. Pinky smiled. He's pretty nice, actually.
If you discount the weekly besieges on our apartment by creatures created by man's hubris at playing tic-tac-toe with animal DNA.
Dan added. He grinned widely, picked up the chrome squirt gun off the table, and held it nozzle up.
He gave me this gun that shoots acid.
A jet of clear liquid shot up into the ceiling, eating away the thin material. Dan looked up and frowned.
Though it has a hair trigger.
Pinky looked up at the now rather exposed pink insulation above them. The landlord is not going to be happy about this. Twilight said, not sure how to respond to anything, really. Pinky looked back down at the mirror. What are you going to do, Twilight? She asked.
We're packing up shop and heading back to Ponyville.
Ponyville? Pinky asked with an excited smile. Twilight nodded.
I've already poured through every book here. I even took a trip to the Crystal Empire and checked the library there. I even searched the library at the Castle of Two Sisters. But I'm not giving up.
Twilight insisted resolutely.
We'll get you home somehow,
she asserted. Pinky's smile turned into a small pout as her lower lip quivered slightly. Home, she murmured softly. Dan put a reassuring hand on Pinky's shoulder. Pinky smiled and looked up at Dan warmly, placing a hand on his. Twilight made a soft throat-clearing sound.
Well, I need to finish packing. The mirror especially,
Twilight said, motioning towards the item in front of her. She smiled.
We'll take good care of it.
Pinky returned the smile. So the next time I see you, you'll be in Ponyville?
We'll all be in Ponyville, and we'll all see you there, Pinky.
Ooh, we should have a returning home party then, or I guess 2 cross-dimensional parties happen to be taking place at the same time, Pinky said with an excited grin.
Our dimension gets to supply the music,
Dan insisted. Twilight's smile widened as she closed her eyes.
Sounds like a blast.
Pinky grinned mischievously. Oh, it's a blast, all right.
Hey,
Twilight began.
Stay safe, you.
Insulation rained down from the ceiling in giant pink clumps on the 2 apartment occupants.
Don't die, you two,
Twilight said. Pinky brushed some of the pink clumps off her and saluted with a free hand. Will do, princess.
I have an invested interest in my continual survival,
Dan stated under a vertical pink fluffy pile. Twilight waved a hoof. Pinky returned the wave and shut the mirror as Dan brushed the insulation off of him and sat next to her on the couch.
So, what now?
Dan queried. Pinky's sad, pleading eyes and quivering lips returned. I need to work on my balance.
Are you still on that?
Dan asked in a surprised tone. Pinky stood up. I can't very well deal with evil, ethereal, extra-dimensional energy entities if I'm tripping over my own feet, can I? Pinky walked into the bedroom and walked out wearing a pair of pink sneakers. I'm going to do it.
Do what?
Dan asked, crinkling his brow. Parkour, Pinky replied. Dan stared at her blankly. That jumpy, flippy stuff I showed you off the computer. Dan paused and said,
I'll give you 5 minutes before you're crawling back here to me in need of medical attention.
Aw, you're not coming, Pinky said with a pout.
As much fun as watching you suffer multiple bone fractures because you threw yourself against a wall over and over again sounds, I think I'll stay here, watch some TV, and nurse my fresh radiation burns.
Pinky scrunched her mouth to the left side of her face. Fair enough, she replied. She started to walk towards the door.
Hey, Pinky.
Dan called out. Pinky turned. Yes, Dan?
Take your phone.
Sure. Pinky walked over to her phone and picked it up. Why?
In case you injure yourself enough that you can't walk or crawl back and you need me to find you.
Pinky smiled, walked over to Dan, and planted a quick peck on his cheek. You're the bestest, Dan. Dan smiled back.
I know.
Righty. Pinky resolutely turned to the door, opened it, and shouted, Parkour! As if it were a battle cry. She stepped into the bright California sun. Dan watched as Pinky closed the door behind her, listened to the sound of sneakers running across the walkway, then to the sound of rubber sliding against metal, followed by a panicked sounding, Wah! And cringed as he heard a loud thump of what was very likely his roommate having a sudden meeting with solid concrete. I'm okay, he heard Pinky call back. Dan shrugged to himself and went back to watching TV. Exactly 4 minutes and 55 seconds later, Dan turned as the door to the apartment opened. As it did, a petite right hand with pink nail polish slumped forward into the apartment. Dan followed the attached arm with his eyes to see the rest of the roommate's bruised and battered body, lying face down on the hard walkway. Dan sighed.
I told you so.
Pinky whimpered in reply.
So, this show is mostly over.
Dan explained.
Can I help you out when it's done?
I'm not going anywhere, Pinky offered weakly, her mouth muffled by the walkway it was pressed against.
Sweet,
Dan replied.
You're the best, Pinky.
I know. Exactly 14 minutes and 35 seconds later. Dan walked over to his roommate, bent down, grabbed Pinky's outstretched right arm, slung the arm across his shoulders, and raised Pinky to her feet. In addition to a bright red indentation for being pressed against the hard ground for so long, Pinky's face sported a number of bruises and a large forehead gash. Dan looked down to see some of the white stripes in her shirt had turned light red in places, and she had a number of fresh cuts and bruises down her bare legs as well.
Well, at least no one can tell you you're not living life to its fullest. Or stupidest, for that matter.
Dan offered. Pinky looked up with large, blue, watery, pained-looking eyes. My entire body feels like excruciagony.
What?
Dan said, crinkling his brow. Excruciagony! Excruciating plus agony. Okay, not my best work, Pinky admitted weakly.
So, I usually don't suggest this, but hospital?
That depends. Is my left arm as broken as I think it is? Dan removed Pinky's right arm from his shoulder and leaned her against his chest as he examined the other arm. A large bump protruded from her shoulder.
You're in luck. It's just dislocated.
And that's good?
Well, we can't fix it without going anywhere,
Dan informed. Pinky perked up slightly. Oh, how do... Ah! Without warning, Dan had grabbed Pinky's left arm and gave it a hard yank with one arm as he pushed the shoulder back into its socket with his other hand. Pinky clutched onto Dan's shoulders tightly as she hung her head and breathed in long, drawn-out breaths.
How's that?
Dan asked. Agony excruciating, Pinky responded in between breaths. She looked up. But better, somehow. How do you know how to do that?
Years of practice on Chris,
Dan replied.
You're covered in bruises, gashes, and cuts, by the by.
Pinky looked down at her bruised, gashed, and cut body. I'm covered with bruises, gashes, and cuts, she pouted in between breaths. Dan sighed and trudged to the bathroom.
I'll get some bandages, ice packs, and the Everclear.
No, it's fine. My mutant healing factor is already kicking in, Pinky choked out.
You don't have a mutant healing factor,
Dan called out from the bathroom. Some screams, yells, startled cat noises, and a cry of,
Why, Mr. Mumbles, why?
Later, Dan leaned his head down as Pinky reached up to apply a band-aid to a large cat scratch on his cheek, her bandaged head resting on his lap.
So give up? Dan
asked. Pinky sat up on the couch. I have not yet begun to stupidly injure myself in a smash-terrific fashion for the sake of regaining my lost perfect balance, Pinky replied resolutely, her body covered in a random assortment of bandages she held in an ice pack on her left shoulder.
Pinky, I really think you should let this one go before you end up in a hospital with a full-body cast, Dan replied.
Okay, but how cool would it be if instead of smashing my face against a car roof during our next drill, I neatly slipped in feet first through the window from the walkway? Dan paused.
That would be awesome,
Dan replied excitedly. So, you'll help?
Pinky, except for a crash course in dance fighting that mostly involved me having cans thrown at me, punching and jump kicking people, I'm not exactly light on my feet.
Ooh, we gotta get Elise to help. She's hecka agilic. Pinky reached into her pocket and grabbed her phone.
Don't you want to recover first? You did dislocate your shoulder after all.
No way! Creepy Denim, seize the day, Pinky replied.
It's Carpe Diem.
Dan corrected. That too, Pinky said as she touched a green telephone icon on her phone. Dan sighed.
Yep, it's definitely gonna be a bizarre asinine task sort of day.
Author's note. Thank you, Plot. You were very helpful. Now go back to your cage in the basement until you'll need it again.
Special thanks to user Dukes of Hazard After W for the story idea.
Now let's read some comments. My eyes don't work very well, so zoom in a lot.
Stonehove says, is Pinky channeling Harry Dresden here? Parkour indeed.
Boulder says, as to Mr. Mumble's I-beams, or my favorite, and then he posts some YouTube videos.
Cats with laser eyes.
Thanks for listening, listeners.